It's a new day on Deep Space Nine, and Sisko has invited Jake and Eggnog for dinner. Discussion of the latter's experience as a member of the security team goes slightly awry when Jake tells the truth on his behalf, namely that he's having Klingon trouble. Any attempt by him to impose order is flat out ignored, which is a problem when you're a guard. Sisko suggests confrontation, as that's the Klingon way, which will either work or end in serious injury. The arrival of Martok, husband of Sorella, nudges the B-plot to one side. He was on the Cardassian border when his ship picked up a message. It's of Maquis origin, which is unexpected as the Cardassians and their new Jem'Hadar backup have been busy wiping them out. The message is for Michael, which just so happens to be the first name of a certain very naughty ex-Starfleet officer called Eddington, and it says the retaliatory missile strike against Cardassia has been launched. The Maquis may be buggered, but they're going to take a few million Cardassians with them. A slight problem. A little while back, when the Klingons were invading Cardassian space, they decided the Maquis were useful and gave them some cloaking devices. It was assumed they'd be put on ships, but they could also have been strapped to space nukes to prevent interception. Which is a problem for us, as if Cardassia gets the shit knocked out of it, the Dominion would likely use that as an excuse to start a full-on war. We have a go at finding them ourselves, but wibblies in the Badlands mean that Defiant's sneaky bastard mode isn't enough to prevent detection, and there are Jem'Hadar knocking about. We're going to need inside data, so it's lucky we know a Maquis leader. Well, former leader, as he's in space prison. Sisko delivers the message and the assessment of what'll happen if those space nukes hit, neither of which Eddington gives much of a shit about. They can probably be stopped with abort codes from wherever they were launched, but he's disinclined to help even after the offer of a pardon. Everybody he knew from the Maquis is likely dead, so what would be the point? The carrot hasn't worked, so Sisko's using the stick. He'll be taking a mega shuttle into the Badlands, hopefully to attract less attention than the Defiant, and he's taking Eddington with him, whether he wants it or not. It's not a pleasant flight, even before they move on to their ideological differences. Eddington gets in a few good blows, not least of which the news that Sisko's old mate Hudson did a dead some time ago. Sisko's not buying the whole thing, though, and thinks Eddington's nonchalance is performative. Being remembered as the cause of a galaxy-spanning war doesn't quite fit into Eddington's image of himself. Back on DS9, Eggnog's trying to find the right time to assert himself. A noisy gathering in Quarks offers a good opportunity, and he thinks just flat-out arresting Martok, husband of Sorella, would send the right message, or would have done if he hadn't fallen off his chair, to a round of laughter from the gathered Klingons. It could be worse. He could be in a mega-shuttle that's being approached by Jem'Hadar ships. Sisko decides to test just how much of a death wish Eddington really has by uncuffing him and leaving him to deal with it. The bet pays off, and Eddington uses some Maquis tricks to lose their pursuers. As there's little point in continuing the charade, he also agrees to help Sisko disable the missiles, though with the promise that Eddington will try to kill him afterwards. The opportunity may not come as those Jem'Hadar ships are back. Eddington has another plan, but it involves some rather risky on-the-fly gizmo fiddling, so Sisko buggers off to a Jeffries tube to work on it. A bit of shaking around, at least one of which Eddington did deliberately, certainly doesn't help, though Sisko eventually gets it to work. The resulting external kaboom has Sisko taking a knock along with the pursuing ships. It might have done the job, but Sisko's a touch miffed with Eddington once he gets back out again, perhaps now considering whether Eddington will really wait until they're done before trying to kill him. Eggnog is starting to take things personally. The Klingons are now loitering on the promenade, and in the spot Jake and he used to occupy to boot. Telling Martok, husband of Sorella, to bugger off is a bold play, and one that threatens to turn physical. Standing his ground was precisely the right approach, it seems, though, and Martok, husband of Sorella, is impressed by the display. Over in the Badlands, we've arrived at our destination. There's nothing detectable from orbit, but then it wouldn't be a very good place to hide space nukes if there was. The settlement is subterranean, a fact that hasn't stopped this place being filled with fog. It also has a couple of Jem'Hadar, which is clearly a bit of a problem. Pooping happens, though mostly at us. Eddington's idea of rushing them is a shit one, so Sisko instead gives him the single weapon they're carrying and makes himself a target to draw fire. Some pipe swinging and pooping later leaves us with a pair of downed Jem'Hadar. Thankfully, these two haven't heard that Jem'Hadar operate in threes, so we don't have to worry about another one as we scarper. Perhaps their mate was killed in a previous fight, as there's clearly been one. Eddington recognises a corpse as someone he knew, though there are likely more in the corridor littered with bodies. There's sod all we can do about it though, so after another casual threat to Sisko, on we go. Eddington points out a building ahead as the launch centre. Someone on the writing team has remembered Jem'Hadar have personal cloaks though, so Sisko poops a spread at open ground just in case and hits two of them. Maybe their third member got killed earlier as well. Inside the building we find significantly less space nuke launch equipment than expected and significantly more people who are still alive. One of them, the face saying they launched missiles at the start of the show, welcomes Eddington. Understandable, really, when she's his wife. See, there aren't any cloaked space nukes, and there never were. The message was a coded one to say they're at the fallback position and ready to bugger off, all while making Starfleet shit themselves and bring Eddington out of space prison to stop those fake missiles. Sisko's unimpressed and twats Eddington, but survivors are survivors, so let's get the fuck out of here. Some Jem'Hadar have other ideas and start pooping as we leg it, some poor schmuck taking a shot to the back. Our recurring characters are covering the retreat to slow down pursuers, so everybody else has scarpered by the time Eddington gets hit. He's a recurring character though, so doesn't die outright, and instead tells Sisko to leave him. A gun to the face provides sufficient persuasion, and Sisko goes after the others. That means there's nobody to see Eddington's final grand self-sacrifice, a fact he'd probably have thought was poignant if he wasn't busy being dead. Back on Deep Space Nine, Eggnog is appreciating his new position of mutual respect with Martok, husband of Sirella, and impressing Kira in the process. Sisko, on the other hand, has a somewhat less satisfying conclusion. He's still not sure how to feel about Eddington or the Maquis in general, so we'll leave him to struggle finding ethical black and white in a forest of grey until the next adventure. So ends the saga of the Maquis, and the story of a certain ex-security officer with it. Prince Colwyn from Krull is no more, and neither his glaive nor his lucky loony would have saved him. That's not far off the truth either, as nothing would have saved him. This story was written largely because people behind the scenes decided Deep Space Nine had too many ongoing plot threads and they wanted to tie one up. The demilitarized zone and its inhabitants were chosen as a sacrifice to make life easier for those in power, which you could argue is an amusing example of life imitating art. To be clear, that's not me saying the story was merely bashed out to do the job. We got a solid entry with a solid premise and a pleasing change of direction near the end. The idea of the Maquis performing a fuck you retaliation is just plausible enough to work, and playing into the idea that those who reject the Federation must somehow have lower ethical standards. The twist, then, that reveal of there being no weapons, is a good one. It not only counters the assumption, but also has us asking why the Maquis felt such a threat was the only way to get the Federation and Starfleet to provide them with indirect assistance. Based on the previous actions of admirals in this regard, there's a pretty good chance an honest call for help might have been conveniently misplaced or delayed. Thus, the Maquis story ends as it began, by making us question the actions of all involved. And that's the theme in close-up when considering Eddington, solid principles leading to questionable actions. It's more messy when viewed at the individual level, though, the inclusion of ego making everything that much muddier. Was this plan born of necessity, or Eddington's desire to show that he has some tactically brilliant ideas? They were given 30 cloaking devices after all, so saving one for an emergency bug-out shuttle isn't really that much to expect, and significantly less convoluted than the plan they actually used. That idea doesn't fit Eddington being the protagonist in his narrative, though, the tortured hero surviving only on his wits. How much of what happened was because Eddington wanted to have his cake and eat it, all with Sisko along for the ride? How many of the dead would have survived if, instead of this strategic showcase of his, he'd just gone with the cloaked shuttle instead? Even the end is drawn into doubt when you consider his ego, such noble self-sacrifice being precisely what he wanted. I'll leave you to decide whether he was really so injured that he'd have slowed them down, or if he just wanted to prove to Sisko that he was the bigger hero. As a story, then, it's a success, and despite some pretty questionable dialogue at points, if I'm being honest. A script mentioning an alien animal in a metaphor has become my casual red flag for such things, and we get a pair of them in this one. Both Sisko and Eddington also used the hackneyed term, "you never give up, do you?" during the story, a line perhaps second only to "you just don't get it, do you?" on the cliché front. If it was a deliberate attempt to show how similar Sisko and Eddington are, then it's a clumsy one, by virtue of that simply not being how normal people talk. Eddington's last word being his wife's name doesn't really help much either, but does at least fit into the romanticized version of himself that he has, so we can let some of that go. None of that dialogue goes so far as to ruin things, despite perhaps taking off a little of the shine, and we're left with a decent send-off for one of DS9's more conflicted, and thus more interesting, recurring characters. It also marks the last time we'll hear about the Maquis, at least in this Trek series, which I think is a shame. It's one of the best examples of how the Federation fails all those who don't fit into their idea of utopia, as well as just how far those in positions of importance are willing to ignore personal suffering if it's politically inconvenient. We'll end then by breaking from tradition for only the second time and provide today's thought experiment in the video because it's directly connected with what I've just said. Based on all that's happened to the Maquis both in this story and everything that's come before it, mixed with Sisko's personal sense of justice, what do you think he did with the survivors? End of episode.
What about Klingon food?
Not enough musk.
Really? I'd have thought you'd get a good whiff from something still moving.
Yes, but it's not got the right odor profile. It's more tart than fart.
Christ on a bike. Who'd have thought it would be so hard to find something that tastes a gopher ass?
I guess our baseline is skewed from all those meals on Voyager. Most culinary skills don't leave you thinking of a sphincter.
It's almost impressive when you think about it. One single ingredient can make anything it touches bloody awful.
Honestly, I think Neelix was doing it out of spite towards the end.
So what we gonna do if we can't find anything that works?
Well, I've been putting out some inquiries and might have a hit. Morn said he can provide exactly what we want.
Seriously? I didn't know Morn kept gophers.
Actually, I think his offer was more of the, how do you say, personal variety.
Oh, the dirty bugger. Woof.